And now, recorded in front of absolutely nobody in their subterranean recording studio deep in the bowels of the Cigar Club of Indiana, it's time for the Five Stones Podcast.
Welcome to the Five Stones Podcast. I am just but one of the hosts this morning. My name is Raymond Modulin, a.k.a. the Real Estate Monkey. And joining me, as always, are my two favorite people. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you guys today?
Delightful.
I
Lovely.
am sitting in the reclusive beach house on a private, secluded island. Where are you guys at this fine day?
Well, mine's real tough to find with the logo right behind my head. I am at the Cigar Club of Indiana.
I'm in the office environment today.
Well, one of us has to work. So welcome. Speaking of the Cigar Club, Joe, what are you partaking of?
Since I am not a cigar monogamist like you, I am smoking what is known as a Brioso. It's a new one I tried. I ordered a couple boxes of New Worlds, but I always try to order something different just to try it. It's not bad. Triple Maduro, 6x60. So
nice. Triple Maduro.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I am puffing on the end of a CAO faucet.
That's the company that makes the flatheads too, right?
It is. They had a promotion. This is a new stick from them. So the local smoke shop, if you buy 3, you get 1 for free. So I tried it out. It's just okay.
A solid 5. Once again, am still on the New World Maduro, as Joe calls it, a cigar monogamist. I hate to think that is true, but apparently it is. So today I thought maybe we'd branch out a little bit from real estate. I know people are getting inundated. When I say people, I mean active real estate agents with all the lawsuit stuff. So I thought maybe we'd take a break this week. And I wanted to talk a little bit about acquiring businesses. Now, we've touched on this topic several different times. Couple shows back, we talked about the franchise model. But I thought maybe we'd talk about, for those of you out there that are thinking about buying a business, what should you maybe look at when deciding where you want to go? And all 3 of us are small business owners. So I think this might be a good area. So I'm going to pick on Colin first. Colin, when you're looking at another business to acquire, the first question I want to ask you is, do you stay within your lane, or are you looking for something outside of that? And what I mean by that is, obviously, your professional career has always been in the banking, which was closely tied to the real estate world. Is that something that you give priority, or are you looking outside of that?
Well, that's a good question. I would say I think it is generally a good idea to pick things that are in your lane of some knowledge, because first off, you'll be more interested in the business. You'll be more interested in the results and in the topic and the work. But I don't think you should exclude other opportunities. So I'm going to say you probably should stay in your lane, especially for a first business or a second business, because of the passion required. And, if you're making a big investment and you're looking at a business, it ought to be something you're interested in and you have some knowledge about, so you can understand the market, understand the product, and so forth. But that said, this is coming about because my brother has a coffee shop, which he's decided that it's going to be a business he's going to sell. And in selling it, he's identifying that there are businesses that can be opportunities if the cash flow is there, or the opportunity to be a remote owner and not an involved owner. So I think you need to be open to considering anything, but for the beginning or for most of the time, my advice would be to find something that you at least are interested in
Yeah.
the subject matter of the business.
Joe, what are your thoughts?
I think it depends on what you are trying to achieve. If you are purchasing a business because you plan on working in it every day, you better have some pretty good knowledge about what you're doing. If it's a business that you are purchasing to hold and put in a portfolio, so to speak, you need to have some idea of what's going on, but you may not need to be as intimate with the details. Like you might be able to own a flight company if you don't know how to fly a plane, if you understand some of the tenets. But if you plan on being the pilot, you need to know that business a lot more than you need to know it just to hold it. So it really kind of depends on what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve. Are you parking and trying to make money, or are you buying yourself a job?
I think that's actually a very good statement that I think people need to think about. And to go kind of in hand, one of the things I look at is, am I going to be the driver or the pilot in Joe's scenario, or is it something that, and you often hear these called what's the term I'm looking for, Colin? It just escapes me. Absentee owner, something like that. Now, for those of you out there that don't know, these guys know, I actually own a hair salon, and I am not a licensed barber or beautician. But one of the things that was key to me in the purchase of this salon was that there was, in fact, management in place. And I think that's what Joe was trying to get to. And it's one of the key elements. As if I bought another real estate company where I was the pilot, that would be a different. But if I was buying something outside of that vertical of real estate, I definitely am looking for management in place. That is one of the key elements to me. And I have kind of created this remote ownership for the hair salon.
If you don't mind, I'll talk a little more about my brother's situation, because he's selling a coffee shop, which has been he and his wife's business. They started it up years ago, and they built out the building. They invested all the equipment. It is a franchise, which actually helped him get started. We talked about that recently, but they took all the risk. They did all the upfront. They did all the hard years of building it up, and now it's positive cash flow. And for whatever reason, he's decided to sell it. And in selling it, he realizes, one, it is a good cash flowing business now. So he thinks that selling it for 3 times net income is actually a good value for the buyer. Now, the buyer is going to work in the business, because that's the only way it makes sense. It makes enough cash flow for one person to make a good living as a lifestyle business. If he had to take 60,000 and hire out, 2/3 of the net income is gone, and it isn't as valuable of an investment. But in this case, it is an active owner is going to run the place and make it a lifestyle business for himself.
I think Joe's comment is probably even more paramount that we should talk about a little bit, is actually what you just said. Are you buying a business to put it in a portfolio, or are you buying a job? And there are a lot of people out there that think they're buying a business, but they are in fact buying a job. And there's nothing wrong with that. Let me be the first to say that. There's nothing wrong with that. You see that the good example would be most of your attorney law firms or your accountants, where they are the integral person. And if they walked away, that business would probably shut down.
Well, I mean, let's look at it from the juxtaposition of having the real estate school versus having the real estate brokerage. The real estate school, because of what it does and what it accomplishes, carries a lot more value than what a real estate brokerage carries, as far as the ability for resale and everything else. because one is a service. Real estate brokerage, it's a group of individuals that are building their own book of business based on who they are and their own
Right.
personality. And that doesn't necessarily translate to a sale.
We just recently had this conversation. Joe and I were teaching a class last week where we were actually talking about a service-based business. And the one agent said, well, she would sell her book of business to another agent. And we were on the side of, like Joe was saying, buying a client list is not, to me, very solid. And what I mean by that,
leads.
It doesn't guarantee that 100% of the people that were using Realtor A are going to use Realtor B because they bought their book of business.
Mm-hmm.
So we were still trying to explain that the real estate brokerage, like Joe said, is virtually worthless as a sales mechanism. Everything I've had, and at that meeting, Joe, we had a business broker there, and he kind of corroborated that
100%.
it was worth about the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, what they call FF&E, and about $1,000 an agent.
Yep.
Because you're not going to sell a real estate brokerage for millions of dollars, unlike maybe Colin's brother selling a coffee shop versus selling some kind of software company. All right. So there's all kinds. And the problem with this conversation is question one depends on the question two, which depends on question three.
Yes.
When I bought the hair salon, I was not in the market to buy it. I had a friend that was a business broker who called me with basically the perfect storm that lined up: management in place, ownership wanted to get out of the business, a very low entry cost, non-franchised, and I acquired it. And it took me a while, but now it's cash flow positive, and virtually I go once every other week to collect rent. That's about it.
Well, and in your defense, it took a while because you happened to get it just as the pandemic was starting off.
Right.
And honestly, I think everyone should throw out that 2.5 to 4 year span, because the reality is that does not track with what business traditionally tracks in this country. Whether it got better because of what you were doing at that point or it got worse, it's all going to come back to an equilibrium, and it's starting.
I will tell you, the school's best year as far as gross income was 2020.
Yeah. Well, people didn't have to physically show up. They could learn online at their own pace. And when you can't leave the building, it makes it a lot easier to sit there and get through that education.
If you were not in real estate, you would not know these type of things, though. If you were not in the real estate education sector, you might not realize the ebbs and flows of the business, the seasonality, all the little things that from the outside you see a business in the last typically we look at the last 2, 3, 4 years as an analysis point. But for in the mortgage business, the last 15 years, rates have been at 3% and everything's been booming and growing. And refinances were there and purchases were there. Now we're at 7.5%. This is a negative ebb situation in the business. So if you're in the business, you understand it. If you know the business, you would understand it. But outside looking in, 2 years ago to today, very different situation for the recent history. So that's an example of why you need to know something about that particular business.
But do you think that if you were a skilled manager, let's say that you had an MBA, wouldn't the management of a business be very similar? So what I'm saying is the management of a hair salon versus the management of a machine tooling product. If you were excellent in that management area where you could identify the weaknesses and the personnel and things like that, that would translate. So I do see that as a general arching
Yeah,
I have this conversation with my wife all the time because she has, in the last couple of years, made a switch to a different company, didn't like it, and has now gone back to the company that she was with for 25 years. And she's been in management for the last 15. And, she's been very, you know, up and down right now because they're making her go back through training because it's a slightly different role. And I truly feel like once you get to that level, about 50% of what you are doing translates to any job. The basic idea of management, basic tenets of business, profit and loss, how to set a schedule, how to hire, how to fire, all of that translates no matter what it is.
Right.
It's understanding whether you are willing to be a part of the 50% of what makes it different. Because obviously there's a big difference between a real estate brokerage and a McDonald's, and a big difference between a coffee shop and a steakhouse, and a big difference between a chemical manufacturing plant and a school. So there's a lot of things that do translate. And if you are an effective manager, you can take that, bag of tricks with you, but there's still a lot that you have to learn about that new environment depending on the role. And you've got to understand that it's going to, we have this conversation with our students at the school all the time. You are not going to know everything day one. There is no way that we can instill, 25 years of experience into somebody in one day in that area. It takes time for those things. There's things that translate and there's things that don't.
Key employees is an important factor. There's a lot of complex considerations, but if there's a good manager in place and you get the feeling that they're going to stay, during the diligence, I would presume you would interview those people.
Right.
Or perhaps even gain, they sell key person insurance and stuff. I mean, if a person is really important to the business, you'd like to know, okay, are you going to be here? What's your plan? And I think asking all those questions is an important step too, because we looked at a business over the last year that it did, I don't know, $1.5 million in business, but years ago they were doing $7 million in business.
Right.
That brings to light some questions like, well, that's a big difference. Now you're doing 1/6 of what you were doing, or 1/5. Did something happen? Was there a brand issue? Was there a change shift in the industry? Was there a problem with a manager? So, what happened?
Well, I would submit to you that I think the biggest risk in starting or buying a business, and since we're talking about buying existing businesses, we'll keep it in that sphere. Biggest risk is in the people that you inherit. Are they what they claim to be? Are they truly going to stick around? Are you guys going to gel enough that they're going to want to stick around, or are they going to run away? All of those things, that is the biggest risk. I mean, you could purchase a business knowing that they have management in place and you think they're going to be there, and 3 weeks later they jump to the competitor because they don't want to be part of a transition and they just go. There's one of the biggest risks in all of it.
One of the other things, like Joe's saying, we bought a school out of Florida where the founder and owner of the school actually left the business. When we took over, he stuck around for a while, but now is virtually gone. Contrast that with, we recently have now bought another school out of Arizona where the founder has wanted to stay on board. And we have already seen a little issue of trying to make that person understand that things are not going to be done their way. They are going to be done our way now. So that's also a thing you got to need to think about with those key personnel. If you're coming in, going to institute a change, some people, especially founders, are real resistant to that change because it's their baby. They brought it this far and now we've acquired it and we think we can take it from here to here, but it's going to be different. And we've already kind of bumped heads a couple times with this owner that has stayed on board about her thoughts on how things should be done versus how our thoughts on things should be done.
Yeah, growth and changes involves effort and pain and investment. And that everybody's got to be on board with that.
And by nature, people do not like change. I mean,
Yeah.
we went through that when we were teaching last week. People don't like change. They don't like to wrap their mind around it. Everyone loves their comfort zone, but I truly think that the only way you ever really get growth is to get out of that comfort zone. Unless you're thrown into different situations where you have to grow into that role and increase your sphere of knowledge, you'll be content where you're at, and that may be fine, but you're not going to gain more.
So, Colin, is your brother actively looking, and what areas? I mean, is he trying to translate his management skills or his pouring coffee skills? Meaning, is he looking for another coffee shop, or is he looking for something out of that?
Well, he's familiar with a coffee shop. He has a regular career as an engineer, like a data engineer in a tech company. But he's genuinely looking for some way to reinvest his money, and he thinks that a business that is cash flowing is worthy of consideration because of the return is going to be perhaps better or more rewarding than putting it in the stock market or other kinds of investments. So I agree with him because he's selling his business that has actually just now started cash flowing, and he feels this guy's getting a very good deal. Now, for his family, it's right to exit this, but the timing of exiting, he feels is not ideal for him because he's selling at a point where it's finally cash flowing, the risk is paying off, and so he sees now maybe there are opportunities when you can find businesses that are maybe a 3x on net income if the price is right and the people are right. But he's not looking for a specific thing. He's looking at, Airbnbs and rentals and real estate and other investments. And
God, get him out of those.
Yeah, he's looking at some and realizing there's other risk involved. So it's a risk and reward thing for him. He's looking at it as an investment where he won't be running the business.
Actively managing this coffee shop, though.
He and his wife have been actively managing, and that's what they want to get. That they don't want to do that.
All right. So that's actually what I was going to ask, because now that my hair salon actually is profiting and is run almost without me, it actually probably has the highest value that it ever will have. It's completely full and very little interaction. So here's the next question for you guys. Being that it's the highest point in its value, should I sell it now? Or because of the low requirement of my time, should I just cash flow it until it's not?
There is no straight answer to that because you like the cash flow, but if you could get 8x on the cash flow, would you take that? If you can get 3x, you might say no. 8x, you might say yes.
Yeah. Well, I'll go back to one of Colin's statements that he said several times, that this is actually the thought process. If I could get 3 years of rent all up front via a sale, would that be better than collecting that money over 3 years where there potentially something could happen over those 3 years?
Here's my theory. Now, I'm not going to denigrate you for being a little older now, but I do think age is a consideration in that. Maybe, if you're 44, 45 years old, maybe you do sit on it for a while because you got a lot of time to make it up if it does happen to go south. But, if you get to a certain age and you can see that you can make that money right now, it makes it a little more difficult to want to run the risk. I mean, I would take my money and run.
You're getting real close to getting punched in the face.
Good thing you can't do that through the cyber world yet. But I mean, and honestly, I think for you, you're at a different point in your career than I am in mine. I mean, I've got more time. If I risk something, I've got more time to make up that distance, theoretically. I mean, I could walk out and get hit by a truck tomorrow. But what I'm saying is,
you might.
I might in the next 2 hours.
You might get hit by a black sheep.
I think it depends on where you are in life and what is important to you in that moment. Go ahead.
I was going to say with the stock market, you want to buy low and sell high. Problem with that is the emotions are the opposite, because when the value is high, you feel good and you want to keep things,
Right.
keep and hold. So if you can step out and look at it and put into consideration whatever your situation is, you like cash flow. You like setting things up for cash flow. If you're at the peak of performance, it is likely that you will have issues if you hold this business, right? You're going to have personnel, you're going to have changes, you're going to have things, you're going to have drops in revenue, because you're not going to go up based on capacity unless you put in some growth. So you've peaked out performance, value is the highest, you're going to be comfortable and you want the cash flow. Do you want to tackle the problems that are going to come over the next 5 years? Or do you want to check out and say, I'll take 3-4 years worth of rent now. I don't have to knock on a door. Maybe there's a better opportunity that I can find some value, like Icon does. He goes in, finds a business with value, mismanagement or something, swoops in, cleans it up, turns it into a performer, and exits. So it all depends. That business is a capacity of what it's capable of.
It is.
So it can only get worse. So as an investment, it would be time to sell. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think from a
cash flow,
strict logical concept, that would be a good idea. Now, I do enjoy cash flow because everybody always says cash is king, and I always correct them that cash flow is king. So the idea I get of being able to collect money every month so that you can then go, oh, well, I want to go on vacation and be sitting on a beach and still collect money. So it is a heart. I meant the logic part of me agrees with you, Colin. The heart part of me is the one that's having the hard trouble.
Yeah, that's the emotion. Now that's a business. I'm just going to guess that your heart isn't in love with salons, and you know what I mean. That's not your wheelhouse, but it is a cash. It's kind of a real estate play. You rent out chairs and you collect rent.
Well, that was one of the things that I liked about it. It's almost a real estate play. There are two business models in hair salons. One is a split, and one is what they call booth rental. All of these are booth rentals, so I collect money no matter what they do. Booth rental works a lot better for somebody that's not working in the business, because I don't really care if they cut one hair or a million, because I get paid the same. So I don't have to kind of be there to watch them. So I did look at it like, hey, it's an 8-unit apartment complex that I go every week and collect rent.
And the pain point is that the tenants are personnel.
Yeah.
So the personnel issues is the only X factor in there.
So those are some questions that I think people need to think about when you're looking. The first one, I want to go back and reiterate, it's like Joe's saying, am I looking for a job, or am I looking to put this in a portfolio? I think once you answer that question, then all the other questions kind of fall in line. If I'm looking for a job, I probably want to stay in my own vertical on what I know how to do. If I'm looking to put it in a portfolio, then I'm looking for either. All right. Because, I don't know hair cutting, but everything else fell in place, and I was not looking for a job. This was purely an investment for me.
Perhaps somebody that's made it to the end of this podcast is considering buying a business and would want to get in the fourth chair and let us talk to them about their considerations and their business.
That would be a good idea. As you notice, as always, there are 3 of us here. We are always looking for that fourth chair. If you're interested, please put it in the comment, and our producer will get with you about coming on, and we can do this remotely, as obvious. So if you want to come on and you are looking to buy, or perhaps you just bought and realized you made the best purchase of your life or the worst purchase of your life, we'd like to talk to you. Please hit the subscribe button and the little bell. We put out something every week, usually in that real estate realm, but we try and stay, we'll bring in business and other things like that. Gentlemen, you got any final thoughts, Joe?
Oh, I would say I would also love to hear from somebody that just sold their business as well. Why you chose to exit now. What were the reasons behind that? That would be quite interesting to me, at least.
You know who the best person would be? Colin's brother.
Yes.
I'll talk to him, see if he's interested.
Yeah, he might be a good one to come on. And actually, while he's in the process, as long as he does not mind very direct questions, why now? Why not now? Why not hold? What are you looking for? That might be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you are interested, please reach out. Colin, final thoughts?
No, my only thought is that I like the idea of investing in a business. I think it's a good consideration. You just need to know what you're getting into. So,
Yeah. So it all boils down to due diligence, and that is probably the longest part of a purchase agreement is due diligence. Making sure you find out all of the real truth and not just, I've owned bars before, and I don't know how many people have tried to sell me a bar that have said, well, on paper, we do this, but I get cash that I put in can't really count that because, you're not reporting it, so can't count it.
But what I love reading are the business for sale listings. Absentee ownership and making lots of money. This is a great investment. You never see one. I'm working my butt off, making no money, and I want out now. No one ever says that.
This business,
that's the reality of 90%.
Well, that question, and I don't want to go past our time, but that question is exactly what I asked Colin. You see a lot of those that are like absentee owner, great cash flow, wanting to sell. Typically, there's either two things going on. One is they're lying, which happens to be about 70% of them. Or two is like Colin's saying, they're looking at this through the pure logic of, I can collect 3 years of value today and go somewhere else. That's the other 30%. So that is one of the questions that I always look at and go, why would they do that? Because I'm a cash flow guy. I like the cash flow. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us and invite you again back next week. If you're out there, once again, push the subscribe button. If you would like to be in chair number 4, please put a comment in there and our producer will reach out to you. Other than that, gentlemen, have a good day.
Take care.
Harumph, everybody. Harumph.